I'm Josh Cooperman, and this is Convo by Design, with an illuminating conversation about creativity, design, and, well, making things. It's that last part that I find so intriguing about Ethan Streicher of Streicher Goods. Anyone who has made something, really made something, as in a thing from a block of wood or multiple parts that were not designed to be put together, knows that there is a magic in crafting something from nothing. It's what I imagine it feels like for a designer or an architect to take a space and turn it entirely into something else. Ethan Streicher is a maker of objects, an art director, ceramicist, and an artist. Ethan and I shared some time and swapped ideas about makers and making. I feel as though the design industry in all disciplines woke up in the summer of 2020. The greatest takeaway from that time came in two parts. One, once something happens, it can happen again. And two, when an occurrence takes place that affects the entire planet and every person on it at the same time, there will be fallout, changes, disruption upon disruption. That's what happened. Many have returned to what they perceive as normality, but we are still in the midst of vast changes in the way I think the manner in which we live. If you want to see what that looks like, turn to creators, makers, artists, and writers. Put down the magazines and news. Forget the news. You're not going to learn anything. They can only tell you what was and perhaps what is, but not what will be. Look to the makers for that. Be skeptical. After all, that's what guards against the dreaded trendy next thing, right? Be curious. Without curiosity, there's no possibility of discovering that which might change your life in unimaginable ways. Be free with honest and probing questions. Our society has changed the way it looks at questions. A question will open the door to understanding. If someone is offended by the question, it might be because they don't know the answer. Makers, thinkers, writers, artists, designers will show you the state of our world in ways others can't or won't. Ethan is a maker. Ethan and I explore what it means to be a creator in times like these. If you're a designer, decorator, or set decorator, Ethan is a new source. You're welcome. And you will hear from Ethan Streicher of Streicher Goods right after this. I am just incredibly proud of this partnership I've got with Thermosol. They have been presenting partners of Convo by Design going on 5 years now. And there is a certain amount of pride that comes with saying that the show is presented by the company that is the best in the world at what they do. Thermosol engineers the most exceptional smart shower products and steam shower systems worldwide, full stop. And it's for a few reasons. First of all, they were the first company to design and patent the technology here in the United States, dating back to 1958. Thermosol, a U.S.-based manufacturer based in Round Rock, Texas, employs an engineering team that designs, tests, and continuously refines the product. Their quality control team tests every single steam generator before it departs the factory. Who else does that? Nobody that I know of. I have the pleasure of working with some world-class designers and architects who tell me, and if you're in the business, you know this, that the idea of luxury has changed, especially when clients want a spa-like bathroom. Steam is mandatory, or it's just not considered a luxury. And if you want to add steam, you have only one true option, my opinion, and that's Thermosol. Mitch Altman, third generation CEO of this family-owned company of 65 years, continues to innovate in the bathroom and shower space through technological marvels such as intelligent showering systems, sound therapy, aromatherapy, technical interfaces, and so much more. And now Thermosol, the industry leader in steam bath equipment and technology since 1958, as I mentioned, is enhancing its already stellar family of products with the new indoor and outdoor luxury saunas, available in 3 designs. The configurations are absolutely amazing, and you should probably go check them out. Indoor and outdoor options. It's amazing. You really do need to check them out. Go to thermosol.com or at Thermosol on the socials. Seriously, then I do this all the time. I
Right.
wind up like, hit record on Zoom, hit the little red button, and then we're off. And I'm having this conversation. It's like, oh, I should probably hit record because
You're like,
that's,
oops.
yeah, yeah. You were having this before I even do that. I'm like, so anyway, hi.
Hi.
I it's funny right out of the gate. It's when did you start? I mean, I kind of feel like when someone's an artist, they've always been an artist.
Yeah.
Even so. But when did you actually know what you wanted to do?
I don't think I've ever known exactly what I want to do.
I can
To
dig
be
it.
to be totally
Yeah,
fair.
yeah.
I think like maybe there's a weird curiosity there or something that's driving the switch ups and stuff. But I think like I guess if I look back, I was probably drawing since I was a kid. Like go to Italian restaurants with my dad and like get crayons and draw all over the table or whatever. Um, and then now it's ceramics. Like I think as of 4 years ago, I found ceramics and like decided to just dive in. Before that was a decade of graphic design, and so I was doing computer graphics and animation, which I still do quite a bit of. And then before that was like painting and illustration, which I'd wanted to go to college for, but then like was a little bit scared of the after like quote after of college of just like okay, what's it like to be a full-time artist straight out of college? Like, do people care about my perspective? Is the economy good where people want to buy art? Like all this stuff just was kind of going through my mind. And then yeah, I don't know if that like I guess that's kind of like I feel like art general, like I'm just interested in art, whether it's like photographing, printmaking, music, like it's kind of all over the place. But
It's just different though. Like,
yeah,
I have kids, and one of my kids has known what he wanted to do since he was in the 5th grade.
yeah,
My other kid, my daughter, she doesn't really know, and so she's figuring it out, and that's totally cool. And the reason I asked the question is because I'm fascinated by the arts. I'm fascinated by creativity, and that's one of the reasons I started sort of branching out. When I started doing the podcast, I it was all just I'm just talking to designers, and then it was
yeah.
designers and architects, and then it was now 11 years in post pandemic where the story behind the object is so much more important than it used to be. That people have found this again. I love talking to creatives who are doing new and unique things, and it's funny because you are such a multi hyphenate. What are you? What do you do? How do you describe yourself? Are you an artist? Are you a ceramicist? Are you a designer? What are you?
Yeah. It's funny. I guess like I feel like right now I am a ceramicist, but I would say that I'm an artist slash designer. I think like that's the way that I think in my resumes and whatever it was, like that's kind of how I talked about myself, where I think artist is first, where I think design was a way for me to use my artistic skills for corporate brands, for whatever it was. Like, but I think if I were to like file structure my thing, the highest one would be artist.
Okay, so now when you're at a family party at the family's house, and your parents introduced you to a family friend who you don't really know that well, and they say, "Oh, here's our son Ethan, the artist," and then the friend says, "Oh, so what do you paint? What do you do? How do you describe your work?"
Ooh, interesting. At least at the moment, I would say I'm making ceramics with a high interest in ceramic lighting. So I think and then I think most people are like, oh, okay. Like, I mean, I've been in this conversation. Like I've had this like family thing. So yeah, like most of it is like I'm a ceramicist who makes a lot of like lighting. That's where my interest is right now. And then if they're like, oh, okay. and then I kind of branch it out and it's like homewares. So I think homewares is kind of the more zoomed out view of it, but lighting is definitely the thing.
Why lighting?
I I like the flexibility of it. I like that there's like so many different avenues to take it and ways to style them. I think it all kind of started with I wanted to replace like my just whatever lamps that I had over, I don't know, the time that I lived in New York. I was like buying random things that I would find or things from IKEA or whatever. And like I just wanted to replace that stuff. And also just challenge myself to figure out how lighting works and I think it's one of those things where like it was an object that I interacted with every single day to like start a like calm down, I guess. Like the first lamps I made were right before COVID. So it was kind of like that those lamps became like part of my daily routine of like I ended the workday, I walked over to this lamp, I turned it on. It was like this nice warm low light and it like put me into like my zen of like checking out for the day and like kind of marked a transitional period, which I think is like the goal of kind of all of the lighting that I'm making now is like the transitional period of mood or coziness or any of that. Like I think that's what's kind of driving it all. Um, but I think for the creation of the lighting and why it's interesting to me is probably because there's like a bit of a design brief behind each of them, which is kind of the way that I like to work. Like kind of coming up with confines and then executing against them, which might just be like my graphic design brain. Um, but I think in general, like that's how I like to work with designing that stuff versus it being just like a artistic sculpture.
Well, and here's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you about that because it's really interesting because oftentimes when you're talking to the artist, it's about form without regard for function. When you're talking to a designer, yes, form is really important, but it obviously has to work functionally as well. When you're talking to an architect, form is just part of the function,
Right.
right? So I also think, when I talk to a lot of designers, it's like lighting. Isn't it interesting? Lighting is like the last thing that people really consider, and it's the most important thing
Yeah.
that you could possibly do because it frames everything else,
Yeah.
right? So when you talk about the artistry and the functionality of your product, do you market test it? Do you work with bulbs? Do you work with the lighting mechanisms? Do you work with I mean, the doing doing the artistic part of it is one side of it. That's fully the creative endeavor. Like I'm a woodworker.
Yeah.
I don't know what my shape is going to be until I get into it. When
Mhm.
you're working with ceramics, I feel like you have to have more of a plan because wood is a hard object that you never know if you're going to hit a punky spot or what's going to happen. But ceramics, you have a mold, you have clay, and you can turn that into anything you want. It's a different,
Yeah.
you define it as opposed to it defining what it's going to be. But then you get to the functionality side of it too. How do you balance the two? And do you market test the lighting part of it?
So I think the way that I go about designing things is like sort of backwards engineered. So like I'll start with a really small sketch, like a line drawing, and then that's based on like I'll figure out the silhouette that I like or whatever that is, the simplistic form. And then from there figure out like, okay, if I'm gonna make this, like what parts do I need to make it happen? And then kind of figure out all the measurements that lead me back up to that place. So like accounting for shrinkage, accounting for all the little parts they have to buy. So like I'm constantly just like on Grand Brass, which is a lamp parts seller from like I think Connecticut. And like I sometimes while I'm watching Netflix with my girlfriend, will just like scroll their like all products page just to like look at stuff because half the time like there's some things that I've MacGyvered over time. Like I made some lamps back like I think earlier last year where I like took a street lamp covering, like a giant plastic dome, cut it in half, like glued a thing on the inside, epoxied all the stuff to it, and then later on, like last week, found that same half dome I made, but like already done. like ready to buy off the shelf versus me like sitting there with a Dremel and making sure the line's nice and straight and like getting this whole thing cut in. It was like a nightmare, but it worked. Um, so I feel like that maybe is like the workflow for at least like finding pieces and making sure everything's going to work in the end, like from a functionality standpoint, is like if I put this here and it's this long, is it all going to add up to like the image that I wanted in the end? Um, and I guess that is like the other answer, which is the fact that I could start off with a ball of mud and be like, okay, where am I going with this? I think I kind of already know where I'm going generally with it. Like I don't kind of just start putting stuff together, and I also don't throw. So I think like some people who throw, maybe it's like you're centering and you're pulling it up and whatever. Like I hand build everything, and the way that I work, at least at the moment, is through slab building. So basically like for lack of a better term, it's almost like you're putting together clothing, right? You kind of have like measurements, everything's flat, and then I take those flat pieces and I make them into a 3D form. So like if I was to make a tall cylinder, right? There's like a circle on top, a circle on bottom, and then like a rectangle, right? That's then wrapped around and joined to make the taller middle section, right? So like I think going into things, I pretty much already have an idea of what I'm trying to get at the end, just to make sure that the thing I'm making is going to fit all the stuff I designed and bought to fit, all the stuff. Like, are the holes the right size? Is the extension of the lamp rod going to be long enough to get out of the top to get to the shade? Like all those little things are like stuff that I have hopefully most of the time I have a game plan for. Um, and like sometimes things don't go right. Like I've had some lamps. There's a lamp that I made that was covered in ping pong balls. And the first one I made all the holes too small, so like or too big. So the ping pong ball was actually like instead of sitting on it or in it, we're like going through it. And so I had to remake it. Um, but yeah, it's all kind of like trial and error. But I've gotten better for sure over the last 2 years of making more and more lighting. Um,
And one of the things, and by the way, I think that this speaks, it certainly tells a difference. Like I asked you a minute long question and to talk for 60 seconds asking a question, and for you to say, oh, well, the way I design is, I mean, you did it, what, 4 words? So it
yeah.
took me 60 seconds to convey the question, and you like 4 words to succinctly.
I mean, I feel
I,
like I gave a pretty long-winded answer, so
no, it's all good. But, listen, the way that you feel about your artistry is the way that I feel about conversations.
mhm.
And I think that it's really interesting because right now, I mean, creators, what's really interesting? The way that society works, and it depends on the generation that you're talking to. Like after World War II, our economy, our society, by the way, I'm going somewhere, I promise you.
Yeah,
So
I'm on the ride.
everything changed. 08, 09, or prior to that, 1999, when the tech bust happened. People changed careers. They went in different directions. 08, 09, more people got into real estate, and more people got into, the gig economy was just starting. People are like, oh, I don't have to have a job forever to do what my passion is.
Right.
Now we're at a point where, coming out of the pandemic, people have changed so dramatically again, and people go into the arts because they spent 2 years with nobody around them, like sitting at home watching YouTube videos, learning how to
Mhm.
do stuff, and then starting to do stuff. And it's like, oh, now I can turn this into a business. But when you start turning that thing into a business, you start to loathe it and despise it the same way that you despise and loathe the work that you have to go in and do every day.
Right.
How do you how do you maintain the passion for that, and how do you then turn that love and that passion into a successful business?
Successful business, we'll see. I mean, that's
Turn
all,
it into a business.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So successful business, hopefully. I was actually just saying about this the other day, or talking to my girlfriend about it. So I I was in the same camp of basically last April, quit my full-time job. Before this, I was a graphic designer for a decade at different brand studios to agencies to startups. And I think my driver behind it, at least right now, to like chase the passion, and the reason I feel like it doesn't feel like work. Like it does feel like work. It's like I have to go do this thing. I have to go, whatever. Um, but I think the biggest piece is that it's all for me. Like I think the reason I quit my last job was I felt no interest in working on big healthcare clients and financial clients, and like I just had no skin in the game. Like I wasn't behind their mission. I get that they're big companies, but like I'm not bought in. So like for me, I'm like, cool, I can be bought in to my own art. I can be, self-driven and be like narcissistic in a way, right? It's just like, okay, like I'm into me and I'm the driver and it's all for me. It's like I get to make my own art and hopefully people are interested in it. And like to me, that seems amazing. Um, that is also a really hard business. So I think like figuring out the all of the other things that I've learned over the last whatever it's been like 10 months. Um, about it as a business have been super educating, right? Before I was doing it as a hobby, selling things on the side, doing full-time work, and then now I'm like so focused on selling product and making stuff. And so uh yeah, I mean at least at the moment, I don't feel like the passion has like it doesn't feel like work yet.
The
The
light
part
hasn't
that
been
does
sucked
feel
out
like
of you
work is
yet.
packaging. I hate packaging pieces. It is so annoying. I used to not like glazing, and now I'm like, you know what? I'll take glazing all day, but I have to wrap lamps and cardboard and peanuts, and that's the part that feels like work. That's like not maybe because it's not creative. It's like the last step.
You are listening to my conversation with Ethan Goods, founder and creator, Ethan Streicher. Man, I love this conversation. Anytime I get a chance to talk to creatives, it's just so much fun. And we're going to be right back with more right after this. We talk about this all the time on the show, how design professionals like you just don't have the time to find your favorite brands in one place with expert, knowledgeable, and non-commissioned professionals to help you specify the right product for each of your projects. They're all different, right? Non-commissioned, though, that means their only incentive is your satisfaction, your happiness. And Pacific Sales, Kitchen and Home, a Best Buy company, has just that. With over 60 years of service in Southern California, Pacific Sales is your destination for exploration, advice, and inspiration. It's really as good as it gets. Here's the cherry on top. There's even more. Access to exclusive builder trade incentives from top brands like Viking, Thermador, Sub-Zero, Wolf, and Decor. Visit a Pacific Sales showroom today to learn how you can unlock additional savings and benefits. They're going to help you manifest your projects and make it a reality. Check them out. Pacific Sales, Kitchen and Home, where excellence meets expertise. Man, I love this. I have a new sponsor partner on the show that I want to introduce you to if you're not already familiar with them. If you are a specifying designer, architect, landscape architect, or savvy design enthusiast, if you have heard about the quiet luxury movement, this idea of crafting a lifestyle around understated elegance, simplicity, and sophistication, there's more to it than that. And I will add uncomplicated living. Isn't that what we all strive for? I am extremely happy. I'm really thrilled to share a company that embodies all of this, utilizing proprietary technology and a focus on sustainability in their stunningly beautiful products. It's TimberTech. TimberTech is the premium decking company delivering multi-tonal, color blending, and natural wood textures in a product that is virtually indistinguishable from a natural wood product. What does this mean? It means it's everything wood should be. A beautiful look that blends seamlessly with a well-designed space, providing years of enjoyment and performs the way you want it to. No splintering, fading, peeling, cracking, or rotting. I had a wood deck at our Manhattan Beach home, and I gotta tell you, it was exasperating every year doing the random board flip, taking out nails, resetting them, restaining them. It was a complete pain. It was complicated, and I didn't look forward to it. I wish I had TimberTech because TimberTech is not only uncomplicated, it's beautiful. It comes in over 20 finish options and 9 collections, and 85% of the material is recycled. This is premium decking for your next project. Learn more and specify it for your next design project. TimberTech on the socials or timbertech.com, where you can find a retailer near you, as well as a number of tools to create, design, order samples, and get the expert help you may need. TimberTech is uncomplicated luxury and performs. It's your choice for your next deck project. Well, and what a lot of, it's interesting because I talk to a lot of interior designers and
Hmm.
landscape designers and architects. And what I think a lot of people don't realize right now is that we spent decades building this national and international and global supply chain.
Right.
All of a sudden, something catastrophic happens. I mean, big societies are not meant to work off of one large supply chain
Right.
because there are too many things: wars, famine, flood, fires, economies. I was watching. Do you ever watch? You've watched Netflix, so
Yeah.
there's a new special at this documentary, a 6-part series on Alexander the Great. I don't know if you
Oh,
got to
yeah, yeah,
see it.
yeah.
Really good. But what was interesting is you have this, what I would call a super creative, super driven creative. I mean, war was his clay and the way that he thought about it. But
Yeah.
what was really interesting is they're having this one conversation about not going too far into Persia, too far inland into Persia,
Mm.
because then you cut off your supply line. And I don't know why, but when I heard that, when I was watching it and I heard that line, I instantly thought of design and the arts and supply chain. And I hate to say it, but once you go into sales, you're kind of in a war. If you
Hmm.
think about it, you really are. You're in a war against other artisans. You're in a war against other big box manufacturers. Or I mean, look, you can go to a big box store and buy a lamp.
Oh, yeah.
You can do that. You're up against designers who don't understand your product or clients who don't have the same vision that you do. As an artisan, as an artist, how do you approach the business side of it? Because I think it's funny. I think that this is something that designers really struggle with all the time. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, so from someone who's creating their own product, how do you approach that?
Hmm. Um, I think that the way that I've gone about it has been like aware of the fact that you could go buy, if I make cups, it's like cool. I can go buy a cup at a store, right? Or do whatever. But if you're, I guess the way that I market myself is like if you want something more special that people don't have, not everyone has, right? It's something like it's not just off the shelf. Maybe it's custom. I do a lot of custom stuff. So if an interior designer wants some specific thing for their client, like doing a certain glaze that matches their room, that's like it's gonna be that one lamp. That's it. I think there's more like I think for the people who want to invest more in their space, like I understand that you could go to the box store and get a cheaper lamp, probably much cheaper, because they're making a ton of them and they're made abroad. But I think for the people who want to invest in their space or invest in themselves or have more self-expression in their space, I think that's kind of the way that I've tried to market myself. At least in thinking about it, it's like it's just me. I'm making everything. It's like in a way they're all kind of one-offs. It's like I'm making everything by hand. So I think like for me, that's kind of the strong suit is like, yes, they're probably, I'm not going to be able to sell to everyone. Not everyone's going to want a $900 mushroom lamp. But I think there are the people out there that will invest in that and see the investment in buying an art piece and buying something that's, special and is like a piece of them at that point.
It's interesting. Back to the lighting side, because I'm
Sure.
I'm really curious about that, and it's interesting too because I don't get a chance to talk to many manufacturers of lighting products. We're at this. I mean, and it's lighting is so interesting. Many people just kind of don't really think too much about it, but we're at this precipice of, I mean, it's amazing. Incandescents are going away, like
Hmm.
literally going away. When I first started the show 11 years ago, we were at another transition where people still, incandescents is what you used, but CFLs were the thing. But then they had kind of that blue, foggy light that got really harsh as the CFLs warmed up. It was like, ugh. And then you got the LEDs, which were just, I mean, on and off LEDs, no, no
Yeah, there's no
dimmables
dimming.
LEDs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, by the way, so it's either too dark or you're on the sun. There was
Yeah.
no in between. And now, I mean, the options for lighting are just, you can now take your product where you would have to have fit an electrical mechanism, and then it has to be big enough for a bulb and for the receptacle for the bulb. Now you can take LEDs and do amazing things with LEDs. How has that changed? How does the technical side of the business, the fact that it's changing, and again, because lighting is so personal, it's
Hmm.
it makes the design. I mean, without lighting, you're either on the sun or it's too dark to really be able to appreciate it.
Yeah.
So I mean, are you a are you a student of lighting as well? I mean, does part of the research go into the actual, what does this do and how does it illuminate?
Yeah, I think those are things that I'm learning, especially as I've gotten like the first lamps I was making are really simple, right? It was like a cord that I bought that had a switch already on it, that had a socket, and I would just like wire it all up, put it together, put a bulb in. And I think now, as I've gotten more into design and learned more, as I've said, of like going through Grand Brass's website and just scrolling stuff and going into lighting stores. Like there's a lighting store on Manhattan Avenue by me in Greenpoint, and I'll go in there and I just like to look at random things and figure out like, okay, like that, is this wall mount, but like maybe I could do that with it. And like the same way I work going backwards, like backwards engineering, is I see the final hardware and I'm like, oh, what could I like get to mount up to that? Or like, how does this work where I can make something myself? Um, for the actual lighting, like little LEDs and other things, like I think the size has been a huge thing. Like seeing how small you can get things now. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's a lamp that I recently made that was a series called the Spectrum lamp. So it's basically like a very papered base, flat topped mushroom lamp. And on the inside of the flat topped shade is a LED rope. So it's kind of like this long beam that goes around the whole perimeter of the inside. And so being able to do something like that of like, oh, I can make like a whole beam of light where if you're not looking up underneath the lamp, which it is a table lamp, so like it's probably rare that you'll actually look up underneath it, but it was just a like hidden design detail that I thought was sick. It was just like, okay, you look under here and there's this like ring of light around this whole thing. But to run those, it's like, yeah, you need the transformer, you have to do all this other stuff. Like I think those are things that I'm getting into now and have to think about even more of like, okay, if I want to do like a certain thing with LEDs, do I have enough like wattage from the LEDs to get them to dim at the right level? Like how many LEDs do I need to run? What type of like transformer do I need? So there's all these like little things that I'm constantly just watching YouTube and like going on Google and checking stuff out. So I think it's probably the thing that I'm nerding out less on. I feel like I'm more focused on just design and like coming up with different shapes and forms. And I'm probably more nerding out on bulbs than I am on the tech. Um, but it is just a part of it where I'm like, if I want to design this thing, I have to like figure out how it's going to work.
Yeah.
Um, just so I don't make the thing. And then when I go to make it, none of it works. So the design is kind of obsolete.
And then, because many designers want their own products as well, and try to do a line, do you sell it off of a store? How did you set up your store?
So the initial store I launched was on a Squarespace. And I just like photographed a bunch of the pieces when I had them, launched it, and then that kind of just sat for a while and I never restocked it. It was like I was balancing like a 9 to 5 and then doing this as a hobby and then weekends. So like once I got the site up and had good photos of stuff, like I was still at the studio making stuff all the time, but I wasn't restocking my website. So my thing was just out of stock forever. But it was funny because people would just come to the site and be like, "Hey, I see this is out of stock. Like, are you making any more of these?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I can make you one like this week." It's just I'm not like constantly photographing and changing out the site and all that. Um, so now I redid my website, updated it, and hopefully it'll be this, ongoing, ever-changing thing. Which is something again, like when you're like running a successful business, it's like, okay, I need to make sure it's up, it's stuff, and I'm testing stuff, right? Like before everything was out of stock, and maybe that drove people to be like, oh man, like I missed it. Like maybe I'll reach out and see if he can make some. Versus right now, I made my site made to order. So it's like everything is available. You click to buy and I make it. And it's to your house in 8 weeks or whatever. But like it's interesting seeing that of like understanding and testing stuff where it's like, oh, I wonder like actually if this way will work, right? Of like made to order versus driving exclusivity and demand and being like, so I'm testing that. Maybe at some point I'll change it up and be like, here's all the stuff that's available right now, and when it's gone, and see if that works. Um, sorry, I feel like I'm like t going off on a tangent from the question.
No, no, no. It's great. I mean, look, it's we're in a really fun and interesting place right now where if you think about it, society where we are now, at least here in the States, we're in a post-pandemic modern industrial age
Mhm.
where used to be like if you wanted to make product you had to have a factory. So then all of these
Right.
people moved, during the industrial revolution, everyone moved from out in the country into the big cities because that's where the factory was and that's where the jobs were. But now technology continues to be more democratized. So you can go on Grand Brass, find the parts, ideate what you want the form to look like, and craft something in your home. If you can't find a part, then you make one with a 3D printer.
Right.
You don't need a modern factory anymore. And besides the modern factories, like if you look at the Tesla plant that's in Austin, Texas, it's amazing. Like it's just football fields and football fields long. It's insane how big that
Yeah.
place is. But half of the tasks that used to be done by people are being done by machines. So the artistry is gone, which now enables the people this reverse industrial revolution. People like you who are crafting, creating, ideating, doing all of your R&D, doing all of your sales, doing everything out of a remote location. What that does is it opens up a whole new world of creativity because you're not bound by previous restrictions, but it also opens up the fact that people will be copying your stuff constantly. The moment you come
Yeah.
out with something new, they dupe it, they try to reproduce it, they reverse engineer it and try to, but you can't change the story behind the work, the heart in the hand, the magic in the hand, the mind in hand, those two things working together. So and that's why I love talking to young artisans such as yourself because you're doing new things and you're learning things along the way. I'm curious if you looked back now at where when you started, what are some things that you might look at again and say, wow, I'm not going to do that again, or I wish I would have done that instead.
Hmm. Of like the early ceramic stuff? Hmm. It's a good question. I don't know. Um,
What were your major mistakes?
Honestly, it was probably my craft in the beginning.
Really?
There was just, yeah, I mean, like, I think what's funny is when I first started doing ceramics, I was doing a lot of illustrative work on them. Um, but I think that my illustrative skills that I had worked on for years had not, my ceramic skills had not caught up to that too. So I'd like spend 4 hours painting like a vase and then it would break. And so I was like, dang it. And it was like this weird, it was discouraging, but also taught me like a lot of patience. Um, but maybe that's like the regret. But I've thought about going back and doing some more illustrative work now that I feel like I have a lot more of like a finesse and like more uh like confidence in things not breaking after spending 5 hours, illustrating whatever it was, or like scraping the surface and putting, it's like that type of investment to me was like, okay, if I'm going to spend this much time on a thing, it's like if you were to make a painting and then someone just walked by with fire and like lit it on fire, right? It's, you're like, oh, what the hell? Like, there's no, like, it's one of those art forms where that type of stuff is like so detrimental in the beginning, but also like that's like a whole part of the process is like learning that shit's going to go wrong and you have to break stuff and like,
Oh my God. It is so funny you say that. I totally get it. I was out in the shop last weekend, and isn't it funny too? Like your worst day in the shop is still better than your best day at an office job sitting in a cubicle,
oh, for
right?
sure.
And I was out there like returning a couple of things because I didn't like the way that they felt to look, but I had this one bowl that I really liked it. And I was like, I'm going to sand it just a little bit more, just a little bit more. And then I'm going to reverse the lathe. So then I'm going to
Mm,
send it the other way so that I can then take the wood grain. Cause when you sand or when you're with a gouge, it's pulling up the threads of the material. So
mm.
you go the other way. And I'm like, I'm just going to reverse it, go the other way. Well, the chuck wasn't on tight enough. And the bowl and the chuck, like 10 feet, just completely shattered. And I was like, shit.
Yeah.
I liked it the way it was. I had to just get that little bit more, that one rough spot. For you, that's that's part of the process, right? And that's isn't part of the joy that you can look at something and I don't know, be able to say this didn't come from a factory.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, like I love that. Like I like that my pieces, while in the beginning I was like so like anal about being perfect. Like I was like, oh, it's like a little out of round and like and like I'm sure that some people are like so meticulous that everything is like perfectly dialed in, perfectly circular, whatever. But I think like embracing the oddities to me is part of the fun is like look like yeah, like also with hand building, it's I think outside of wheel throwing, like wheel throwing is probably easier to get things to be really circular. So like I don't know why I just decided to do hand building because I liked it more. Um, but I think like embracing those oddities to me, yeah, it makes it feel more human. It makes it feel like, oh, someone's hand did this. Like there's a random indent from my finger somewhere. I mean, most of the time I try to fix all that stuff, but like sometimes things get past you and you're like, oh, oops. And there's like some little dent and you're like, cool, yeah, like this thing is it's as perfect as it needs to be. But at least to me, right? When people are like, when's it done? It's like it's as perfect as it needs to be. And the level of finesse that I want it to be, where it still looks dialed in, but it has like, you know, some marking of me, or like the fact that it's not perfect. It's not like so dialed in 90-degree angle. It's like maybe one's a little, it's got a little wave to it or something. It's like if you look at a drawing, it's like from afar, it might look like a really straight line, but if you get up close, it's probably like a little wavery from whoever's hand. So I think like that's, I don't know, some part of it that's like I don't know, it's special.
Well, and I agree with that too, and that's why I love this conversation. It's kind of like the most inspirational thing people do these days is travel. They travel
Mhm.
and they go someplace else and they see something because generally you're going to see things elsewhere that you don't see where you live, and those oddities, those curiosities, the differences um, are so interesting, and that's why there is this whole now going to a major manufacturer of product, there are benefits to that too. But I talk to designers all the time who tell me that there's a struggle now as far as accessorizing,
Hmm.
because you look in the pages of the big trade, the big design magazines, and it's really funny because you can play the drinking game where you can be like, all the manufacturers, right? Manufacturer bingo, where you can go through and find, oh well, I've seen that in all of this other work, and I've seen that in all of this other work, and I've seen that in all of this other work. You look at some of the videos that some of the magazines produce for their YouTube channels, where you walk through celebrity houses, and it's very well designed, it's
Right.
very well organized, it's very well edited, but there's nothing out of place. There's nothing missing.
Mm.
There's no negative space or a product that isn't perfect. And I think that that's one of the areas where you talk about perfection. It's okay not to be perfect.
Yeah.
It's okay not to be perfect. And I think that when it comes to the storytelling of things, I think more people now are looking for people like you, Ethan, which is why I love the opportunity to be able to share your stories. So I totally appreciate the time. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I'm
Yeah.
like, thank you for the questions and the time, man.
Yeah, you bet. And when you make something really weird, I would email me pictures. I would love to actually see. I love the weird stuff, man. It just, you know, we spend so much time trying to make things that people will like
Yeah.
instead of making things that we like.
Right.
You know what I mean? So like a mushroom lamp, like 10 years ago, would people look at a mushroom lamp and be like, "Oh, that's cool." It took a pandemic where you couldn't get anything new or specialized. And you know what else it was? You got to see in everybody else's house, which is funny because like
Oh, like via Zoom, you mean?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
like you got to see how people really live. I think that that's a conversation that hasn't even happened yet. Is
Yeah.
by the way, that person that you thought was so organized and had this great, the way that they portray themselves outside, they must have like the perfect household. And then you see them on camera and their camera's like this, and
Oh
so you're
yeah.
look, or it's like that, but the lighting is terrible. Or you look in the back and you see dishes in the sink. It's like, oh, they're human. That's so cool.
I think what's funny is seeing different archetypes of people like through Zoom. Like anytime I was on a call with an editor, like a video editor or like sound or whatever, like all their backgrounds kind of started looking, and you've seen this even on YouTube and like other things, like there's like a mold sort of, I don't know what it is, but like I'll get on a call and it's like dark and there's like some framed LED thing and like a plant and whatever. And it's interesting to see like you almost feel like you're in an editor's bay, which may be why they're designing it that way. But like if you look at like tech reviewer YouTubes or any of this stuff, it's like they all kind of have an equation to them at some point.
Oh my
And
gosh,
like
it's so true.
I mean, you see it in everything, right? Like I could be classified as like art hipster, probably based on how I'm dressed or whatever, right? Like I get it. I get it that there's a mold. And I think it's because we have to put things in boxes, right? To just be like, okay, I'm talking about this thing. But it was interesting to see how that like glimpse into people's homes. I was always really interested in like uh at my job we were talking about doing a like MTV Cribs COVID edition, where it's like, all right, walk me through your house and like let's see what's up. Because like we're just so curious, like where do you spend all your time? Like what's your vibe? Like we see how you dress at work, similar to what you're saying, right? It's like, but what's like behind the scenes, like what's your taste? Like are you super modern and contemporary? Do you like really old stuff,
I
Um,
think that, it's funny. It's funny you should mention that because now, I consume a lot of news product. I really do. And not any particular news product. I just all of it because for me, that's how I get informed. Right. And it's so funny to your point. Like you'll look at the news channels where I can't remember a time like when a CNN or an MSNBC or a Fox News or would do a cutaway,
hmm,
they would always do a cutaway to someone who was either in a studio or they would do a cutaway to someone who was in the theater of war, right?
yeah,
Those are your cutaways. You're doing a remote cutaway, but certainly you're not going to somebody in their living room. And then
right.
all of a sudden, this phenomena of going to people's houses, and to your point, like that whole mold, that model, like everyone's living room, sort of they had that one wall which was a set,
Yeah,
and
where it's like, oh,
you
some shelves, whatever. Yeah.
and all of the books and this whole design trend now of what is it, bookshelf rich or library, whatever it is, where
Just
where
like
it's like
having books for books' sake.
having all, and you're looking at the person who's talking, it's like, dude, you did not read any of those books. You
So
read none of the,
me and my girlfriend have been watching a lot of like the architectural digest, like, the home tours and whatever. There, so most of the people, like, I think there's like a divide, right? There's some people who are like, this is my home. My designer did this. Look at this. My designer did that. We use these chairs because I liked the cloth. It's like, okay. And then you have some people who are like, I forget the guy's name who played Hopper from Stranger Things. Anyways, he has a tour of his like New York loft, and he's like, here you can see all these books. I haven't read any of them, but they look great. And he's like, my designer picked these out. And I liked how he was just like, yeah, I don't know what these are, but I like how they look and it's cool. And then like I feel like that combo of like some people you could tell they just had someone pick stuff off a shelf and they have like besides saying like, yes, I like it, there's not like themselves in it, right? Or you'll see some people who are like, oh, this is the chair that I've had since college and I love it. It's beat up and
Which, by the way, is really funny because if you pay attention, and what I love about that is most artisans do.
mm,
Um, this idea of I have been railing against influencers
mm,
for years now. And I will tell you why. It has nothing to do with, and by the way, I used to embrace the term full throatedly, like wholeheartedly embrace
yeah,
the term of influencers because I think at a time, the idea of the influencer was really great. It's someone who can, through their curated eye, influence trend and
right.
influence new things. And I think that's great. Well, what happened is this whole bastardization of the influencer was it's like, hey, look how great I am. And people go and buy all these followers and then have a channel and then create this content on their phones of like, all these people love me. So I must know, Dunning Kruger to the nth
Yeah,
degree. And I must know what I'm talking about. And then they put all of these things up and then people just go mass consume this crap that they don't need or want but saw somebody else like it. It's a habit trail of stupidity. I mean, it really is.
yeah,
To the contrary, the influential who will tell you like, here's what I think you would enjoy and here's why. It's like what an intellectual approach to that kind of thing where it's not just stuffing bookshelves with stuff, but it's actually putting, if you like this, then you might like that, which is how AI got popular. So for an artisan, you look at what's super popular now and you figure, oh, there's going to be a total backlash to that. So if people are loving geometric shapes now, they're going to love curved in a couple of years.
right.
Organic, curved, I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I want a successful business, I'll have to stay ahead of the game. I feel like that's an interesting point where it's just like making like I guess because it is a business, I want to make what I want to make. I think I don't, I've had one client, I had some like person reach out to me and they're like, "Hey, can you make," it was like 200 of these trays with this
Oh,
design on them with blah 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 blah. And I was like, "Cool." And I sent them a quote that was like really high because I was like, "I don't want to do this, but I will do it for this much money." Um, and I feel like that was like, be my design monkey. Okay, I'll be your design monkey for X amount of money. But I think like what was interesting was I feel like I'm an artist who makes lighting, but like my lighting is art that's functional. So like I think like and it's what I want to make, like whatever I'm vibing with, right? But then there has to be kind of some research, like you're saying, into like my customers and what people want, that type of thing. And like yeah, I mean, people have to want this stuff. I could just make it in a whole and like hopefully people want it. And so far people have liked what I'm making, which is great. Like I'm happy with the response. But I think I also have to be wary of like just making stuff because I think it's the thing that will sell versus making stuff because I want to make it and I think it will sell. Like it's like there's like two, those two pieces of like
listen,
I'm making something just because I'm like, these are hot right now, or is
that's
it,
the
you
that's the
know,
creative conflict. I mean, it is a true creative conflict. Is trying to marry the two, and I totally get what you're saying. Back to the very beginning of our conversation, when what you love becomes what you have to do, it becomes a job, and then you start to loathe and hate it. And anything we can do to keep that from happening.
yeah, I mean, I don't want to make stuff I don't want to make.
Exactly,
That's the gist. People being like, "Hey, like, why don't you make like mugs with handles?" And I was like, "I fucking hate mugs. I don't need to like
because
make
it's
a fucking mug with
stupid.
a handle." Because like I'm like, look, there's so many other people making mugs with handles. Like,
Yeah,
you know what? Handleless mug. Oh, I'm gonna mark it that
handleism.
way. But it's more that I'm just like, I don't really care to make cups either. There's just a lot of shit where I'm like, I just don't need to make that. And yes, sure, it's probably not the smartest business decision for me to like not really want to make cups that much. But like, I don't know. I don't really care to
I
make
don't want to
changes.
do it.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I totally get it. Ethan, this was great, man. Thanks for the
Yeah.
time. This
Yeah,
was
thank you so
fun.
much.
Yeah.
Design Hardware's newly remodeled showroom is where you will find a gallery-style space with a thoughtful display of products, purposefully positioned to allow unbridled exploration and discovery. High-end faucets, luxury tile, natural stone, wood floors, and bespoke hardware selections are presented in a holistic manner, strategically arranged to stimulate creativity and transition your vision from the conceptual stage to a fully realized space. Conveniently located, free parking available. Stop by to find your inspiration. Collect samples, get expert advice, and tackle everything on your shopping list all in one place. Visit them online at designhardware.com or in the real world, 6053 West 3rd Street in Los Angeles.
So there you go. Thank you, Ethan, for taking the time to talk and sharing your work. Thank you to my partner sponsors for your continued support of the show and the design community. It's important to the health of our industry. You're amazing, and I appreciate you. If you are a designer interested in learning more about my partner sponsors like Pacific Sales, Monogram, Thermosol, TimberTech, and Design Hardware, as well as any guests or concepts you heard in the show, please check the show notes for more information. Please also keep those emails coming, convobydesign@outlook.com, and reach out on Instagram at convobydesign with an X. Thank you for listening, subscribing, downloading. If you're not subscribing, make sure you do so that you get every episode the moment it's published. Thank you again for listening. Until next week, be well, and take today first.